All right. Hello, everybody out there in the tubes of the internet, and welcome to This Week in Space. My name is Joan Emerson Bell. I'm an astrologer, tarot reader, licensed mental health counselor, and I like to come here every morning at 11-ish a.m. Mountain Time to give you the breakdown of what's going down in the celestial spheres. Before we get into this week's fascinating astrology report, just a couple announcements. I'm going to be co-facilitating a retreat in Greece. I think I'm shifting to the section in May, where we'll be going to Delphi and talking about dreaming and oracular dreams. You can look on thedreammysteries.org or follow Sarah Jane's Dreaming to take a look at that and see the program. All of her retreats are fantastic, and I highly recommend them. And I'll put a link in the show notes, and there's a link in my bio on Instagram if you are interested in that. Also, besides this, I have another astrology practice called the Melee Report, which is a sometimes weekly radio show where I go through the transits of the week and I set them to a pretty excellent playlist, if I do say so myself. It's very much like this show, except for less talk, more rock. So if you're interested in that, there's a link in my bio, and I'll throw another story in my stories on Instagram, and you can catch the link there. I'll also put a link in the show notes for the folks who are catching this on YouTube and on the podcast version. All right. I think that is all of the announcements that I have for y'all today. And welcome on in, everybody. And welcome to This Week in Space. 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 For December the 22nd, 2025 to December the 12th, or sorry, December the 28th, 2025. Got kind of jumbled with my numbers there. Just thinking about how we are winding down this tumultuous year, and ooh, I am ready for it because it's been kind of gnarly. But it is the gnarly times in which we engage in the practice of soul making, which I find incredibly important. So we got a pretty light week in space, which I'm very grateful for because it is the holiday season. We're coming off the solstice yesterday. So happy solstice, everybody, and welcome to the return of the light. The days start getting a little bit longer, minute by minute, moment by moment, as we climb our way up to the summer solstice in June. And so it's all uphill from here, my friends. And yeah, we talked about the solstice in last week's episode. And, this is a time for thinking about what we are releasing from the past year or from the past collective years, and also what we would like to draw in with the returning of the light. So, a very powerful time as the sun reaches the furthest edge at the Tropic of Capricorn, the limit of where the sun can go, making it the shortest day of the year here in the northern hemisphere and the longest day of the year in the southern hemisphere. And I went to a little solstice ritual yesterday, and one of the people who was running it was talking about how, these places of limits and these places of borders are really powerful. The edge of things becomes a place of power because it is the limit. And we can sort of work with that power, access that power, and bring it into our lives and kind of channel it in ways that we find productive. And I think that this is some really good Saturnian magic here, finding the boundaries, finding the limits, and sort of working at that edge to call in what we want and also to let go of the things that maybe have served their purpose in the past but are no longer helping us. So just wanted to toss that out before we get into the week in space. And again, we're only going over three transits today, which is great for me because it's been a busy week in the life of a wizard. And so, let's just dive in without further ado. Starting off on Tuesday, December the 23rd, we have Venus in Sagittarius squaring Neptune in Pisces. This is happening at the spooky old anaretic degree of the mutable signs of Sagittarius and Pisces. It'll be going down at 29 degrees and 25 arc minutes. So, Venus deals with beauty, relationships, and love, all great things. Neptune is a planet of imagination, fantasy, and dreams. And so, if we go hard into the dream, it can make our reality kind of fuzzy. You know what I'm saying? And Neptune can be not only fuzzy, but also confusing, foggy, and illusory. And so under Neptune's influence, we can very easily mistake our fantasies and the ways that we want things to be for reality. Neptune likes to see the world through some rose-colored glasses, and so it can miss a lot of red flags. If you're wearing rose-colored glasses and everything's looking red, you see a bunch of red flags and you're like, "Ooh, they're waving flags. It must be a party. It must be a circus. Let's go over there." And so, with this square, which is a hard aspect, we want to practice sort of taking off the rose-colored glasses for a minute and being like, what is actually happening here? What is the color of these flags that are waving in my face? Neptune tends to see the best in people or situations. It has this kind of idealistic influence. And this can be great, except for if we get ourselves caught up in things that actually aren't that good for us, or that cause us to kind of disregard our boundaries. Neptune is dissolving and so can dissolve boundaries really easily. But last week we had a Venus square to a Venus square to Saturn, and we just did all this work around boundaries. And so maybe remember some of the things that were coming up last week. So this week you're not like, whatever. And yeah, one of the things that I brought in, I believe last week, is this idea that in the holidays, we are kind of in this liminal space where our boundaries are shifting, and we want to do that consciously. We want to be very conscious about how we shift things or how we restate our boundaries or how we reset our boundaries so that we don't just kind of get hijacked by what's going on around us or what other people are asking from us and be operating unconsciously. We also don't want to compromise our values because Venus is a values is a key Venus concept. And so with Neptune being like everything's great, like and creating this fantasy around how we want things to be, as we get pulled into that and maybe realize it's not how we thought it was going to be, there can be places where we are making choices that compromise our values, and Venus is really about our value system, what we value, and the things that we like and the things that we don't like. And by sort of allowing those things to dissolve, I think we lose a key orientation point in ourself, which can leave us adrift in a Neptunian sea. So with this square to Neptune, we can get kind of pulled into a fantasy of how we want things to be in our relational situations and kind of ignore how things actually are, which might turn out to be annoying or at worst problematic later on. So with this first part of the week, it's important to remember to keep your feet on the ground, especially if you find your head in the clouds. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, and Gina Maria saying, don't compromise your values like CBS. And yeah, I totally, yep, exactly. We see all of these larger entities who are compromising their values, which is, I think, setting a really poor example for everybody else who's down here kind of doing the work, and then to watch corporations or governments or people in power compromising their values is pretty frustrating, if not downright upsetting. So yeah, don't be like CVS or CBS. Don't compromise your values, my friends. And so I also want to bring in that fantasies can either be pleasant or challenging. And our minds will not only make up stories about the things we want, but also the things we are afraid of. And with this hard aspect of Venus, Neptune may conjure fantasies of relational misattunements. There can be negative fantasies that people don't like us or we are not important to the people that we care about. Neptune's fog can kind of obscure signs of affection and attention, or we may misread cues, which can cause us to sort of spiral out into a negative fantasy. Oh, everybody hates me. Or it might activate old relational wounds, which may in fact be beneficial because we have a Mercury trine to Chiron to round out this week that might help us to heal some of these parts that may have gotten activated while Venus was moving through this square to Saturn and Neptune. And we'll get to that at the end of this week's program. And so when challenging feelings and old stories get triggered, they tend to move to the surface and give us an opportunity to turn towards them and to begin the work of healing them. With Venus's square to Neptune, it can be important to ask ourselves, what's actually going on here? And find ways of coming back into our bodies and back down to Earth so we don't just spin out into whatever fantasy Neptune is conjuring for us. If we can stay present with our current experiences and curious about what's arising, it gives us the ability to be with and to turn towards whatever emotions become activated through this transit, and allows us to respond to ourselves with care and compassion instead of reacting to a story that we are creating that may be a tad untethered or rooted in misunderstandings and miscommunications created by Neptune's foggy influence. So, on the flip side, this transit can be good for creative practice and for daydreaming. And I brought you the bad news first because I think that's polite. But now get ready for some good news with this transit. You it's really important to let our minds wander and to sort of drift off into the imaginal realm for a while. And I think this helps us to stay open to inspiration and to access our innate creativity. Neptune has kind of a draining influence, so this may not be the best day for getting things done and would probably be better spent in creative practice or daydreaming or lazing around and allowing our minds to wander, reading fantasy novels, watching fantasy movies, stuff like that, which I think can be really regenerative, not only to the body, but also to the soul. Um, I've been reading this book, In the Absence of the Ordinary, by Francis Weller, who wrote a fantastic book on grief called The Wild Edge of Sorrow. And he just came out with this book of essays, which I'm telling everybody about. It's one of those books. I don't have it in this room to hold it up, but it's one of those books that when I read it, everybody I talk to, I'm like, oh my God, you have to read this. But in this, he writes, beauty's allure helps to open the aperture of the heart. I love that. I'm going to say that again. Beauty's allure helps to open the aperture of the heart. And I think that this is a pretty powerful Venus statement. He goes on to say, beauty calls us outward into the world. It quickens the senses, awakens the heart, and pulls us deeper into intimacy with the folds of the world. And I think a benefit of the Venus Neptune square is that it can help us to seek out beauty, either in our imaginal worlds or in the physical world. And the relationship between these two planets, even in a hard aspect like a square, can lend itself very well to creativity. So as we are, moving through the foggy waters of Neptune and sort of drifting into daydream and fantasy, we can kind of call on Venus's love of beauty to either create beautiful images in our mind or to go out and seek them in the world, which can help open the aperture of our heart. And in evolutionary astrology, Neptune is thought of as the kind of higher octave of Venus. And, I'm not really into hierarchical structures, but I think that this is an interesting perspective to take. Because Neptune is this idea of universal love, where Venus is interpersonal love. And so in a square, these two aspects or versions of love may be at cross purposes. And we are navigating um, uh, which vision of love kind of leads and which one follows. However, at their core, these two ideas of love are not incompatible, and they are both about care and connection and compassion. And what's most important is that we spend some time loving ourselves instead of longing for another human or the entire world to meet our needs for connection. Under this transit, one may feel that one has so much love to give, which can be a feeling that is maybe too big for one's body. Or we can get wrapped up in idealized vision of how one expects others to behave, which can lead to disappointment or eventually resentment. So again, coming back to into the present moment and checking in with ourselves around what's actually happening here. How is this in my body? Is there anything that I can do to give myself some compassion and tenderness if I have a feeling that feels challenging to hold? Are there ways that I can ask for help in holding these feelings? Or are there ways that I can support and resource myself as I approach these challenging emotions? One last thing about this transit is that Neptune is dissolving, and it may create the desire to dissolve some of our separateness from others. And again, Venus is relational, likes love, likes being in connection, likes socializing. And Neptune is like, oh my God, I love you so much. I just want to like dissolve into you. And we can kind of lose our sense of self, or like go into like maybe some codependent tendencies under this. Or we can kind of forget ourselves. And I think that, there is nothing wrong with the longing to be in connection with other people, but we want to maintain a healthy understanding of ourselves as differentiated from others and to, again, consider our boundaries, even as Neptune is trying to wash those boundaries and our sense of separation away. Neptune can also be purifying, cleansing and washing the Venusian parts of our lives, like longing and desire and pleasure and relationships. So can we allow ourselves to sit in this sort of Neptunian bath and dissolve some of the impurities that we have been holding on to because they are familiar? And allow Neptune to kind of wash away old stories around love and relationship and connection that may no longer be serving us. And again, I think one of the benefits of this transit is to be thinking about what is the ideal relationship for me? How do I want to feel in relationship? Not what qualities somebody else has that are going to make them the kind of perfect partner, or like, does this person check all the boxes? But how do I want to feel in connection with other people? And this is both romantic and platonic. How do I want, what are the qualities that I want for myself in the relational container that I am creating with other people? And, as we create a vision of this or have an imaginal understanding of this, this teaches our body and our heart how to move forward towards that. And Carolyn Casey, I love saying this. Carolyn Casey, who's one of my favorite astrologers, has this great quote about Neptune that imagination lays the tracks for the reality train. So if we can get a good vision of the qualities that I want to feel, how I want to feel in relationship and in connection, then it helps us to know how to move forward towards that. And so I think, again, this is a great practice with the Venus square Neptune, is to really create an idealized vision of what it would look like to be in a relationship or friendships or community that feels generative and nurturing and supporting, that helps me to feel how I want to feel. Because again, that is a value that Venus is looking for, having more of what I want and less of what I don't want. Dig? All right. Moving along to, I believe, Christmas Eve, December the 24th, we have Venus entering Capricorn. And so Venus will be in Capricorn until January the 17th. So the day after Venus perfects their square to Neptune, they enter into the Saturn-ruled sign of Capricorn. The sun just entered this sign back on Sunday, December the 21st, which marked the winter solstice, which is the shortest day of the year in the northern hemisphere and the longest night. So Capricorn is cardinal Earth. It deals with the world from a grounded and practical place, which I think is really helpful for Venus as a way of regrounding after the foggy square to Neptune. Capricorn sees things as they are, which I think is very important if we are kind of lost in the sauce of the Venus-Neptune square. And, Capricorn sees things from a very grounded and practical perspective and is interested in what's here, what's present, what is solid, what can I touch, what can I work with, and what can I build with in order to achieve my goals. As cardinal Earth, Capricorn is establishing facts and coming into relationship with one's physical reality. And in order to try and figure out how to work within the structures that we are given, within the limits that we are given. And so as Venus moves into this sign, Venus begins to get the lay of the land and kind of map the terrain. And Capricorn is about mountains and mountain climbing and the recognition of the equipment and conditions that we need to climb the mountain successfully. And so Venus in Capricorn is climbing the mountain of love, or the mountain of relationship, or the mountain of beauty, the mountain of our values. And so it can experience the breathtaking beauty from the top of the mountain. This doesn't mean that everyone is going to start a relationship as soon as Venus moves into the sign. That's totally silly. And, and everyone is on some relational mountain, whether they are single or coupled or whatever. We are humans and, we need connection. We all have relationships to other human beings and to non-human beings and extra human beings. And so in this sign, Venus begins to take a kind of practical approach to relationship as well as relationship challenges. Venus asks themselves, how do I make this work? What do I need in order to be able to achieve my goals here? And what are my goals in this situation? And again, coming off this Neptune square where maybe we have done the work of being like, fantasizing about what it would feel like to be in an ideal relationship as Venus moves into Capricorn. It's like, okay, cool. This is where I am, and these are the things that I need to gather or develop or work on in order to make that vision a reality. And so we can also think about how we stay agile and flexible as we navigate the terrain of values or relationship or love or beauty. And, Capricorn asks, what is real? And what do I want to do with the reality that I find myself in? What are the limits and structures so that I can work within them? Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, who is a planet of limitation and structure. And again, Venus was squaring Saturn last week. And as Venus moves into Capricorn, Venus is figuring out the rules in relationship, the rules of engagement, the rules of love, and the rules of aesthetics. All of these things have rules that are either spoken or unspoken, and it is Venus's job from now until January the 17th to figure these rules out and to understand the qualities of this landscape before they move into Aquarius and start breaking all the rules. But it is unwise to break the rules before we have learned to master them. And if we can think about relationship, or if we think about, aesthetics in relationship to art, which I think is a great way of looking at rules and Venusian qualities. The painters whose work really sings have learned the structure of aesthetics, the rules of color theory and perspective, composition. So when they break these rules, their work makes sense. If we don't understand how things like light and shadow and perspective and composition function, breaking these rules or abstracting from them tends to look really muddied and confusing. It doesn't make a great work of art. And so Capricorn reminds us that we need to develop a good foundation so that our abstractions and improvisations work instead of just becoming visual noise. And it's only when we know the rules so well that they have become embodied that we can begin to break them and create variations on the existing forms. And Venus through Capricorn is an opportunity to really learn these rules so that we can understand, okay, how do I work within this? How do I go outside the lines? Like what happens if I do this? intentionally doing things that should not work, but that do because we have an understanding of the structure that we're working in. And this gives, a sense of structure and grounding to our improvisation, which helps to like really support our creativity. Capricorn asks us to learn the structure so that we can learn to play within it. Capricorn is aspirational. It sees the mountain and it wants to climb the mountain. It is looking for the view from the top. And it wants to be seen for what it has achieved. Oh, damn, you just climbed that mountain. Wow, you're amazing. Can I get your autograph? The question with the sign of Capricorn is, what is the right mountain for me to climb? Capricorn can get so caught up in the desire to scramble up to the top that it can forget to ask, why am I even climbing this mountain? Or the really important question, is this really the right mountain for me? With Venus in this sign, we are choosing the mountain based on what we love and our value system. What do we want more of in our lives? And what mountain does that live at the peak of? And what is the work we are willing to put in to get more of what we want? And what are the sort of physical constraints that we are working within to achieve these goals? So there you all go. That's some things to think about with Venus in Capricorn, as well as, some Capricornian overview, which I think is very applicable to the sun's entry into Capricorn, which we didn't really discuss so much last week because we talked more about the winter solstice. But, I trust you all that you know what I'm talking about. Which brings us to the last transit of the week, Saturday, December the 27th. We have Mercury in Sagittarius, trining Chiron, who is retrograde in Aries. So, my friends, Mercury is our cognitive processes, it is the way we take in and process the world, as well as the ways we are able to communicate our experiences. Currently, Mercury is moving through Sagittarius, which is a mutable fire sign ruled by Jupiter and a sign of philosophy, truth, and belief. However, Mercury is in their detriment in Sagittarius. So they're kind of under-resourced in their current position. Part of why I think Mercury is in detriment here is they are a very curious sort who likes to question things. And in Sagittarius, they are questioning held beliefs and truths, which make them kind of a heretic, which people don't really like so much. And it makes it kind of hard for Mercury as the heretic questioning the Sagittarian beliefs, and it sort of pisses people off. And so, if you think about somebody who is a heretic in some situation, they tend to be shunned or ostracized or even worse, and those are under-resourced positions. However, we may want to ask ourselves, what are the ways that we can resource Mercury here? And what helps to kind of fuel the fire of both curiosity and the quest for truth as our cognitive function and communication styles move through this world of the centaur? The other part of this trine equation is Chiron, who is retrograde in Aries, forming a supportive aspect to round out the week with Mercury. Chiron is known as the wounded healer who received an incurable wound from the poisoned blood of the many-headed Hydra. And this toxic blood was smeared on the tip of one of Hercules' arrows, and Hercules accidentally shot Chiron during a brawl in Centaur country. And the Hydra poison has no cure, and Chiron is immortal, and so cannot die, which left Chiron searching the world for a remedy to his suffering. And in his quest, he was able to learn a variety of healing techniques that he could share with others, even though his own wound was never fully healed. And besides the kind of wounded healer moniker that Chiron holds, he is also the teacher of heroes. He taught all of the great Greek heroes, including Hercules, Jason, Achilles, and even Asclepius, who is the son of Apollo and the god of healing. And although Chiron is best known as the wounded healer, his role as a teacher, helping individuals step into their power and refine their skills, I think is just as important. And so Chiron in the sky is currently retrograde and is working on self-integration and embodying the wisdom of our experience in order to support our personal healing. I see this as Chiron kind of retreating into their cave on Mount Pelion to read all of his literature on healing and mix concoctions and make tinctures and engage in his self-healing so that he can better support others. So, with Mercury and Chiron forming this supportive aspect to each other, we can think about our mental processes, Mercury, and the ways in which past experiences have informed our present awareness of the world and ourselves. Mercury is the kind of cognitive framework through which we filter the world. This framework is composed of past experiences as well as the stories we tell ourselves about what is happening in our lives. And this framework is designed to help us to survive, and in some ways is always scanning for threat or danger. And, this sort of programming, this feature of our programming, has helped us to survive for thousands and hundreds of thousands of years. But the brain evolves much slower than our technology. And so we have kind of a hunter-gatherer brain living in a fast-paced technological world, which oftentimes creates a sort of mismatch. And so, even if we don't experience a physical threat, we may encounter situations that threaten our ego or our sense of connection. And this can create a sense of activation, which can make us feel like, oh my God, I'm going to die. And, this can be triggered not by a saber-toothed tiger, but by somebody not returning a text or looking at us weird. And this passes through the filter of Mercury, and we kind of conjure stories consciously or unconsciously that can lead to fears of abandonment or being ostracized or ultimately death. Because again, if we have relational misattunements, it can tell our body, oh my God, I'm getting kicked out of the community and I'm going to die. Or it can feel very similar to an actual like threat to our lives. And like that might sound crazy, but again, we are wired in this way in order to help us to survive. Also, we have a inborn negativity bias, which we are always scanning for danger, and we see danger, we're like, "Yep, there it is. I knew it. I knew it." But we do not take in the things that are not threatening or not dangerous in the same way because, hey, like whatever, I like this isn't a threat. It's not a problem. I don't need to worry about this. But then when somebody looks at us weird, we're like, oh my God, like that's the end of the world. And our brain kind of locks onto that and fixates onto that. And so, as Mercury comes into this supportive trine with Chiron, who is currently in Aries, a sign which asks us to be brave and bold, we can kind of learn to turn towards ourselves with curiosity, which is a great mercurial quality, and to have the courage to uh, hold ourselves and to see what we need in this moment to feel all right instead of just reacting from a place of activation. Chiron can help us to update this mental framework through opening to this sense of activation and working to self-soothe and to support ourselves. Chiron teaches us that the medicine grows next to the poison, and that feeling of being triggered can help point the way to what we need to heal and ultimately support ourselves. So, returning again to Francis Weller from The Absence of the Ordinary, who suggests that we learn to turn towards the feelings when we are feeling triggered. And he says, there is no bypass strategy of avoidance that can help resolve the difficult emotions we will encounter. Turning towards our suffering is essential. He goes on to say, when we hold these challenging emotions with affection, concern, compassion, and interest, they stay flexible and fluid and capable of change. We keep them warm by holding a steady vigil with these difficult guests and not turning away and neglecting what these pieces of our soul life need from us. When we offer this kind of devotion, our sorrow and fear will change. And then he goes on to discuss the importance of community for our healing process and allowing ourselves and our sorrow to be held in the container of community. And this is something that Chiron was maybe not so great at. When his wound would get triggered, he would hide in in his cave and wallow in his suffering, which only made it worse. And in the grips of those experiences, he would forget the resources he had available to him. And so Weller talks about the importance of community in the healing process by saying, be mindful of how much conditioning we have received that tells us to go it alone, to not need anyone or bother anyone with our struggles. Challenge these thoughts. This, as one of my teachers said, the solitary journey. This is, as one of my teachers said, the solitary journey we cannot do alone. Coming into the company of others, human and more than human, reassures us and adds to the internal feeling of safety. So this is one of the ways that we can update our mental frames and the ways that we are wired for threat. We can create corrective experiences through coming into connection with ourselves and with our broader community that can hold us and support us as we do the difficult work of healing our wounds. This then helps us to change those mental programs we are running that keep us kind of on edge and activated. And as we come into connection with the world, we can learn to soothe our nervous systems and come into a new sense of safety with ourselves and our environments. And through doing this, we can also do the Chiron work of helping to support other people who may be having a difficult time through being like, oh, I went through that, and these are the things that I was able to do to really support myself. And now I can share this with you, or I can be a regulated nervous system while you are, going through whatever activating state you are in, and I can be here and just like hold you in that until you can learn to hold yourself. And so, with that, my friends, I bid you a fond farewell. Thank you for tuning in and checking this out. And if this was of interest to you, or you heard something that somebody else might benefit from, please pass it along. The show is on my Instagram at Blind Stallion Space Wizard. It's in my feed, and it comes on live if you want to check it out in real time at 11 a.m. ish Mountain Time on Mondays. It also comes out as a YouTube video, and you can find that on my YouTube page, Camp Wizard Camp, or comes out as a podcast. And you can listen to that by searching in your podcast app for This Week in Space with 3 exclamation points. Other than that, yeah, I'm available for tarot and astrology readings. I also do astrological based coaching. So if anybody's interested in that, you can check out my website at campwizardcamp.com and drop me a line there, or hit me up on Instagram at Blind Stallion Space Wizard. And yeah, don't forget to check out the Melee Report, my weekly themed astrology radio show with all the astro weather you never thought you needed, set to all the music you never thought you would hear. And yeah, with that, I'm out. And yeah, I'll check out the comments in a moment. But until next time, my friends, be good to yourselves, be good to each other. And as always, may the force be with you. Bye now.